Dressed as a priest one day, a professional thief named Parker arrives at the Ohio State Fair. Two other members of his team, Melander and Ross, are dressed as clowns and are working on gaining access below the security cabin where the cash collected at the fair is counted and held. Noticing that distraction has kept Hardwick from realizing the signal sent by the clowns, Parker calls his attention to it, causing him to get on the move. Making steady progress, the clowns remind themselves that they have only 5 minutes before Hardwick would be setting fire to the hay bales behind the livestock pavilion. Hardwick, however, runs into trouble when he is stopped in his path towards the livestock. While he quickly adjusts the plan, Parker arrives at the security cabin. Taking their cue, the armed clowns appear in the cabin and threaten the staff while Parker successfully erases the security footage. Everyone's phones are then collected in the hostage situation, even as Hardwick ends up setting fire close to the fair's stage instead. The clowns, Melander and Ross, meanwhile work on breaking open the locked cabinets in the security cabin. Thinking back, Parker is reminded of his girlfriend Claire, whose father, Hurley, is Parker's partner, and had informed him about these cabinets being full of cash. He is also the one who had put together the team for the heist with people that Parker doesn't know. While they find the fair's stash of cash exactly like Hurley had mentioned, the fire spreads and causes an explosion upon reaching the stored gas tanks. Parker is surprised to hear the explosion, as they did not intend to hurt anybody. Amidst the chaos, nonetheless, they are still able to escape with the cash, as another team member, Carlson, drives Melander and Ross away. Shedding his disguise, Parker also exits the fair, and coming upon Hardwick later, he then confronts him about the change made to his plan, which could put them in danger if anyone got hurt in the fire. With the arrival of the rest of the team, though, they quickly switch vehicles and drive away together. Appreciating the success of Parker's plan, Melander suggests using the $1 million they've stolen from the fair for another jewelry robbery gig that promises to give them $2 million each. Unwilling to work with the team further, however, Parker refuses the offer. Matters escalate when shots are fired and Carlson almost loses control of the car. Melander manages to swerve the vehicle back onto the road just as an injured Parker leaps out. Forced to end Parker's life, Hardwick flees with the rest of the gang, leaving Parker stranded. Fortunately, a family of farmers finds him and he is promptly taken to a nearby hospital. Waking up a while later, Parker catches the news reporting one death in addition to several casualties at the fair due to the fire and is reminded of the wayward plan. He then knocks out a guard and escapes from the hospital to successfully avoid being questioned by the police. Getting away in an ambulance, Parker breaks into a motel room before hot-wiring a car from the parking area. Interrupting an ongoing heist then, Parker takes off with the cash. Stealing another car outside, he makes his way to meet one of Hurley's associates named Norday. Offering him some cash, Parker asks for fake documents to be made and is told that they will be ready in the next 5 days. Getting in touch with Hurley then, Parker asks where he can find Melander. Asking Parker to refrain from hunting Melander for revenge, Hurley states that Melander has big connections, including mob boss Danziger, who is also Hardwick's uncle. However, Parker's persistence is rewarded when Hurley reluctantly provides him details of Hardwick's brother Bobby in New Orleans. A fight breaks out when he meets Bobby, who warns Parker about the consequences of attacking him, mentioning that Hardwick and Melander took off with his part of the money. Parker needles out the information about the team being in Florida's Palm Beach. Fearing Claire's safety, Parker leaves her a message asking her to stay alert and go into hiding before informing Hurley about heading to Palm Beach. The next morning, the team is working on planning their next job when Hardwick learns about Parker having visited Bobby. Much to the shock of everyone, they now know that Parker is indeed alive and looking for revenge as well. Threatened by Melander with his life, Hardwick contacts his uncle Danziger to deal with the mess. As a result, one of Danziger's hitmen breaks into Claire's house when she is on her own. Unknown to the danger, she is packing a bag to leave even as the hitman discreetly makes his way through the house looking for her. Finally realizing his presence, she escapes through the window and punctures the tire of his car before getting in her own car to escape. Speaking to Parker then, she is asked to head straight to a safe house at a fishing camp nearby before he promises to soon get there himself. Getting to Norte's then, he sees that Danziger's men have found him as well. While Norte has them handled, he insists on wanting to stay neutral and out of trouble. Once Parker gets his documents in the name of an oil baron from Texas named Daniel Parmet, he compels Norte to end the lives of Danziger's men. To ensure that Norte does not cause him any trouble later, Parker acquires his weapon with his fingerprints intact before taking his leave. When Hurley meets up with Parker a while later, he tries his absolute best to convince Parker to let go of his revenge for Claire's safety. He even offers him his own money and lies that Danziger sent Parker's share from the Ohio gig. A man of principles, though, Parker refuses Hurley's requests and instead convinces him to buy a house in Palm Beach. At the office of an estate broker in Palm Beach, an employee, Leslie Rogers, cunningly steals the contact details of a wealthy client named Mr. Parmet, who is looking for a third vacation home and is willing to pay in cash. Desperately needing the commission on this deal, Leslie ends up meeting Parker, completely unaware of the trouble she could be walking into. After visiting a few places, Parker promises to meet her again the next day to look at some more options before heading over to Lake Okeechobee to meet Claire. The next morning, while going through the mansions Leslie shows him, Parker learns that she has been recently divorced and that she has to help her ex-husband with his accumulated debt since he smartly filed for bankruptcy before the divorce. She also shows him a recently sold house, saying that Mr. Rodrigo from Texas bought it for renovations. This house interests Parker since he knows that Melander spoke about getting a house with the funds they stole in Ohio. While he goes over the details of the house on his own later, Leslie checks his documents and finds it strange that he neither has any active mortgages or credit card dues. Before she can look further into it, however, she receives a mail from her bank detailing that her car will soon be repossessed since she hasn't been able to make the payments for it on time. Revisiting Mr. Rodrigo's house later that evening, Parker finds that his hunch is true when he sees Melander and the crew have set up their base there. Waiting for them to leave, Parker finds his way inside the house and plants a few guns to remain hidden before retrieving more guns from the storage and damaging their firing pins. Hearing the team return just then, he hurriedly puts them back and safely makes his way out. However, he sees Leslie waiting for him there, who extends an invitation to go out. Since she saw him stealthily leaving the house, he agrees to join her. On their way to her office, she reveals knowing about his fake identity. Interestingly, she also says that she found Mr. Rodrigo to be a fake identity as well. At the office, Leslie gets emotional while she speaks of having to live with her mother and continuously being strapped for money. Having already recognized that Parker isn't in Palm Beach for a house but possibly for some crime, she offers to help him. Convinced that he could use her knowledge about the place to his advantage, he takes her leave, saying that he will consider her offer. 2 days later, Leslie finally hears back from Parker and the two meet at an empty condo nearby. When he mentions that Melander and the crew are planning for a massive heist involving jewels, she immediately recognizes the auction they would be hitting. She informs him that the city is auctioning $75 million worth of jewelry the following night and tells him about the massive private property where it will be held. While Parker and Leslie can't look through the place, Melander and his team are posing as event organizers to play speakers that have already been fitted with fireworks. Meanwhile, Leslie directs Parker to the unguarded back entrance from where he spots Melander and Ross. Dropping Leslie off later, he then gets back to his hotel. In his room, he is suddenly attacked by Danzinger's hitman. An intense fight breaks out between the two of them, and surprisingly well matched in terms of skills, Parker is able to land a few accurate punches on his opponent, who is supposedly Danzinger's best guy. Finding himself strangled by the shower curtain, Parker eventually stamps on the hitman's foot to get away and then strongly knocks him out. However, just as he tries to retrieve his opponent's knife, he is strangled yet again. Parker attempts to fling the hitman off the balcony but ends up hanging by it with him, kicking him to his end. Then, a heavily injured Parker gets back to his room. The next morning, Leslie wakes up to the arrival of a cop she knows at her house. When he asks her questions about Mr. Daniel Parmet, she accepts, having shown him a few places. Soon, she realizes that Parker has taken refuge in her house in his injured state, even as the cop details that someone fell to their end from Mr. Parmet's room at the hotel. He also adds that since stealing a car from the hotel, nobody has seen him. Promising to help with more information about him once she gets to the office, Leslie sees the cop off before rushing over to where Parker is hiding. He insists that she gets to a payphone and call a number he gives her. He tells her to get to work after she makes the call while he stays behind with her mother. As instructed, Leslie makes the call before heading to work, where she watches a video someone has uploaded that shows the hitman falling off the balcony. Distracted and worried about Parker, Leslie soon heads back home. She finds Claire there, tending to Parker's wounds. As it turns out, it was Claire's number that Leslie had called earlier, since Parker is adamant about going ahead with their plan for that night's auction despite his state. Once he is cleaned up, Claire promises to wait for him at the fish camp and soon takes his leave. Mentioning that Leslie could be watched by the cops, Parker then urges her to get back to work and assures her that he will be gone when she gets home in the evening. While Leslie stresses about Parker's plans for the evening, Melander, Ross, and Carlson disguise themselves as firemen. Elsewhere, Hardwick mounts a boat, and by evening the team waits on the sidelines as the auction begins. When the fireworks in the speakers placed at the event go off, everyone is promptly evacuated just in time for the fire truck's arrival. Lying about the fumes being toxic, Melander gets the police to ensure that everyone maintains a safe distance and that nobody gets back in. The crew then gets to work smashing into the display cases and pocketing the jewelry. Once they clear everything, Hardwick is notified to get nearer even as the crew prepares to leave. They face trouble, however, when on the one hand Hardwick is questioned by a Marine unit of the Sheriff's Department for being on private property, and on the other, the real firemen arrive at the location. Decked in underwater gear meanwhile, Melander leads the others into the lake. While Hardwick promises to back away, the organizers of the event realize that they have been robbed. The island is then promptly locked down as the police get to work and Leslie watches in anticipation. Meanwhile, Parker slowly makes his way to the house the team bought and breaks in. Determined not to let the plan fail, Leslie also gets to the house. Soon after, having swum all the way over, Melander, Ross, and Carlson arrive as well, while Parker carefully hides inside the house. While the team celebrates their win, Leslie peeks in through the window, which is where she is caught by a returning Hardwick. At gunpoint then, she is forced inside the house, and Melander figures out that this has got to do with Parker. When an enraged Hardwick gets violent with her, Leslie notices one of the hidden guns that Parker planted earlier. Melander stays with her while the others then spread around the house to check for Parker's presence. This works out in his favor, as he can easily sneak up on them and finish them discreetly and in isolation. Silently stabbing Ross first, Parker then spots Hardwick to follow him in, even as Carlson gets back to Melander and reports nothing out of the ordinary on the side of the house he checked. When Hardwick also reports the same, Melander notices Ross's obvious absence and forces Hardwick to check it out. Leaving Carlson with Leslie, Melander then looks about for Parker and notices that Leslie has spotted him. Threatening Leslie's life, he urges Parker to stop hiding, even as Leslie grabs the hidden gun. She shoots Carlson. At the same time, Melander realizes that Parker fiddled with his gun and instead tackles him. Parker manages to stab him before shooting him to his end. Just then, Hardwick holds Leslie at gunpoint and threatens Parker with consequences he would have to face with Danziger if he is harmed. Confident that Hardwick's weapon will malfunction just like Melander's, Parker gets Leslie to safety. Reminding him of the change he made to the Ohio plan, Parker then shoots Hardwick. With the whole team down, Leslie then helps Parker out of the house. He asks her to hide the stolen jewelry in a vent at her office and informs her that he will soon send somebody to collect it from her. When he assures her that she will certainly get her share from the proceeds of its sale, which will be in several millions, Leslie is relieved to know that her money woes could soon be history. In Chicago, 6 months later, Parker meets Danziger only to end his life. After another year, Leslie finally receives her most anticipated mail in the form of her share of the gig, exactly as promised by Parker, who also sends some money in gratitude to the farmers who took him to the hospital and saved his life.